It's Sunday, November 5, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is an award-winning writer, actor, improviser, and comedian who shot to fame playing Donald Trump in the show he created for Comedy Central called The President Show. He's now host of the podcast Don't Panic. Anthony Atamanuik, welcome to the Weekend Show.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for having me. Two Anthonys.
Two Anthonys, yeah. How
Yes.
will we cope?
I don't know.
I have a lot of questions for you, but firstly, I think we should preface this conversation with the fact that the reason that I asked you to come here today is because in politics, as far as I'm aware, if you get a character who rises like Boris Johnson in the UK and Donald Trump in the US, the British way of dealing with these people is to ridicule them. And the media will ridicule them because they're obviously not serious. They're, serious people. They're obviously not serious candidates. They're not really into public service. They're obviously in it for themselves. Right. And so the British way to get rid of Boris Johnson, as they did, was for the media to ridicule him. Right. And so he is now not the prime minister. Yeah. That didn't really work with the media in the US. In fact, it's widely reported that US media actually promoted Donald Trump because he was box office. He gave people a reason to watch the television. And we now know how that's ended up with obviously the rise of fascism and just a very dark period in American political history. So, my first question to you really is how did the President Show come along at that time? Because this started as a kind of late night talk show with Trump as the host, but very early on in his presidency.
Well, first, the media, U.S. media for Trump, I think numbers wise, was almost close to $1 billion in free coverage that Trump was given from 2015, from August of 2015 all the way through to the election. And I think it's just important for your viewers to understand that the inverse effect, I think, occurred partly because we have for-profit media in the United States, whereas you have partly essentially state-sponsored or supported media, much like our public broadcasting system in the United States. That's right. So I think the cynicism also around people even turning their nose up at Trump during the initial coverage period from the escalator roll down to maybe this, I think the second debate in the South Carolina, I think was the second GOP debate in August 25th, I think, of 2015. Maybe it was 27th. But the point being that during that period of time, I think that you have a cynicism in the United States, both of our media apparatus and also speaking to politicians. I think that there was a general perception that most people who are in politics, regardless of Trump or not, were also in it for the wrong reasons. Citizens United, along with a number of various chipping away at institutions from the Tea Party onward, the cynicism of the House leadership over that time, and also the birtherism issues around Obama. This had been building steam, and Trump happened to become the golem or the form of what it became. But this was building steam prior, right? So I think that in terms of him as a phenomenon, I think just the right psychopath happened to show up at the right time when someone had built a casing for that psychopath to inhabit. And I use that not as even a pejorative term. I really am not. I'm not a therapist. I'm not an analyst, but I am an actor. And I can say that he exhibits a lot of psychopathy, from being charming to being able. I mean, if you look at one of the famous interview clips is him being asked what his favorite passage of the Bible was. Yeah. And he says, well, I don't want to say which verse it is because it's very personal to me. And then they go, well, which book, or not which book, which testament, old or new? Yeah. Oh, I like them both equally. That is the mark of a person who understands how to manipulate other people's, not only manipulate other people's responses and reception, but also how to play on people's sense of embarrassment and politeness, which is one of the really great marks of a narcissistic, psychopathic personality. How do I play on other people's politenesses in order to take advantage of them? So that being said, I started, I've been a comic actor and performer for a long time. And I, would sort of do these boot camp shows where every Tuesday I would just do a different character. And it was a lot of social commentary mixed in with the whatever material I did. Long and the short, I think I improvised Trump in a show at a flagship show at UCB called ASCAT. Someone said, "Oh, that Trump was funny. You should do a show." And I think I booked it a week later, September 7th of 2015. I did a show called Trump Dump. And the predicate of that show was he had won. And this was his first press conference after he won. And you can go back. I think I have some clips up online. You can go back and look at those clips. Almost 90% of what I said in 2015 came true. So anyway, I ended up doing a tour with my friend James Adomian, who played Bernie Sanders. And that tour led to a few specials on the Fusion Network, which was a cable channel that was becoming a YouTube channel. And then when he got elected, I had appeared on Howard Stern and it appeared on CNN on election night, on The View on election night. But I had started making the rounds and sort of assessing things and doing my own form of commentary. So by the time he got elected, it sort of became natural, this idea of like, well, what would Donald Trump's fireside chats be? Like if FDR did fireside chats, in order to comfort a nation, wouldn't his be sort of a mix of Carson from the 70s and the Robert De Niro hosted like talk show from Casino, that when his character has to like get relegated to doing, can't do anything with the casino. And it's sort of like the third act of the film. And he's doing this sort of very Vegas-y, cheesy kind of show. So I figured this would be Trump's fireside chats, would essentially be a late night talk show straight from the Oval Office. So that was the conceit of the show, to give you as best a brief history as I can give you of what it was. But I mean, I said that Trump was a white supremacist as Trump. I was also doing him on Brooke Baldwin's show in February of 2016. I think I was one of the first people to say, his alignment with white supremacy, on a major cable news network. And it made the producers nervous that I said it. But again, to me, these things are observations. They're not even, it's a dispersion to be a white supremacist, but it's an observation. And I can get into why I kind of knew that and saw that, but I don't want to steamroll you. But
we'll get into that, because I genuinely am interested. What also interests me is the lack of political commentary for the public at large in the US. We have a lot of shows on British television that are satirical comedy shows, political satire, and that it keeps the national conversation going. And it occurred to me that really if you don't watch the news, and a lot of people don't watch the news, then really the only interaction you have with what might be going on is with the late night talk show hosts when they do their monologue. And the monologue invariably, whether it be, obviously Jimmy Fallon does a little less politics than some of the others, but ultimately that is really, for a lot of people, a way to get their dose of what's been going on in the political world. And it is rather tragic that somebody who has come to represent, the far right and the extreme nature of politics in fascism, it had only really been communicated to the public that these things were happening because of the late night talk show host. And that's why I thought your show, The President Show, was so genius, because to humiliate Donald Trump and to send him up is to give him a late night talk show, which his ego is perfect for. Yes. To set it in the Oval Office where the Resolute desk is the desk that every late night talk show host has, and to have guests on and to have Bernie Sanders as a sidekick. To me, it was genius. And I know it ran for 20 episodes on Comedy Central. Yeah. So with that gift, did you feel while you were making that show that you had a social responsibility to expose him for who he really was?
Yeah, I would argue that you could look at our series as a book, as an apocryphal book or a Nostradamus-like roadmap for what ended up being the next 4 years from that point on. Yeah. And just a one correction, that it was actually Mike Pence was the sidekick. Pence. Yeah. Yes. Played by my showrunner, Pete Gross, the great Pete Gross. We not only saw it as a responsibility, but, my background was I was a poli-sci minor at Emerson College. I was always very interested in politics and probably really was in some way latently more interested in commentariat and news. It's, in some way, but just, knew I didn't have the gravitas to pull it off. So I did comedy instead. But I've always, I've been going to primaries in New Hampshire since the late 90s. Like I love politics. And I love the game of it. And anyway, I'm very interested in it. And even during that 2016 cycle, our former governor in Massachusetts, Bill Weld, was the VP candidate for the Libertarian Party. And I knew Bill, for many years back. And my father played in a band that he was a fan of. So in other words, I've been involved in politics and understand the language of it. And I think there was sort of three things that were really important. Was identifying that Trump not only was complete anomaly in terms of his behavior, and also going back to August and September in those early primary debates, when he blew the roof off of everything by calling out, Jeb Bush and nicknaming people and Marco Rubio with the water and all this stuff, these things, which were funny and entertaining. And at the time, I think if you were a Democrat, or especially if you were a mainstream left-leaning member of the commentariat, you sort of enjoyed watching Trump blow apart this field of these sort of empty suits that were delivering the same BS, right? The only problem is that the Democrats have the same group of people. It's not like we don't have our own empty suits, right? If I'm aligning that way, right? And so I think there was a celebration of him. And I think that there was a devil's bargain that it will be worth it to watch him mess them up. And then we will come in with our reason and our leadership. And like you said, listen, the general public is very ill-informed. And one of the reasons the general public is ill-informed is economics. Most people still watch the nightly news, which has to be broadcast. Right? If you don't have cable, you have to have a digital box. Also, the electorate that matters, that turns out to vote, is working 2 or 3 jobs. They are probably not receiving civics classes from the underfunded public education that they got, right? So you have also a population that is Black, white, Latinx, every stripe that you can imagine, that are exploited and overworked and underinformed. Okay. And that to no fault of their own. That isn't like the ignorant masses. That is designed this way, right? It's partly a design to choke out the working person so that there's less opportunity for real change, because if you had real candidates getting elected, they would agitate in ways that would disrupt the system. Trump just happened to be the absolutely wrong agitator, right, at the right time. And, we saw the responsibility of the show to be expose him, be funny, but not only expose him, but let's expose the entire model. I mean, our show, one of our Christmas special was BB Newirth essentially playing a sort of Maggie Haberman type character, and Trump and Maggie Haberman, BB Newirth, singing a song about the mutually parasitic relationship between the mainstream press and Trump. Yeah. For all the, and we're still doing it. I mean, we're still the trial. The only difference now is that the media was so shamed by covering Trump. In other words, Trump was so egregious post-COVID that that it was harder to go, let's show his entire rally, right? As they used to do. CNN used to show an hour and a half. They used to literally talk like a football game. You'd have the half hour prior where all the talking heads. So everybody made a lot of money off of him. A lot of the things he says about those things are true. The media made a lot of money. A lot of people celebrated him. But the other truth about Trump is that I think anybody who knows, and you know, probably coming from UK, and I know coming from New England, that there is still a form of a caste system of who actually gets to be in politics, who actually gets to be the real landowners in the city, right? And you have to have a certain background, and you're probably not even Catholic, you're probably not, it's like there is a real rigid, strict zone that you can be in to really be in charge in this country.
Well, look how the squad has been ridiculed.
Exactly.
Ilhan Omar and people that are seeking to, they really care, like they genuinely are there for the right reasons.
Yes.
And yet they are almost being ridiculed out of mainstream politics by not just the opposition in the House, but also the media.
And squeezed by their own supporters.
Right.
Squeezed by the DSA because now they're not living up to the radical change that they want. In other words, you cannot win because what Trump ushered in that was more destructive than anything was the era of true extremity that was celebrated and not marginalized. And the argument I would make is that back in my day, you had, I don't know who your guy was, maybe it was Enoch Powell or whatever, that you had the guy at the card table for Lyndon LaRouche in Harvard Square or whatever, and he had pamphlets and he was sort of screaming about stuff, and you could sort of marginalize it. Or Morton Downey Jr. on New Jersey television that was broadcast on UHF channels in the 80s, right? You had this sort of margin, right? Weekly World News.
It was the fringe. It was the fringe of politics. It wasn't at the very heart. And compare that to the new Speaker of the House, who is a far right Christian nationalist.
Yes,
and within his first week, Mike Johnson we're talking about, he has already using leverage and taking this kind of religious belief to direct his. I mean, he refused to meet with some Ukrainian religious leaders the other day.
Yes,
I mean this is an example of how the pox of extremism can infiltrate an entire political system very, very quickly.
Yes,
because it's only been it's only been 6-7 years since this all kicked off. In it's always been around Tea Party and obviously down back to the KKK, but it's never really been at the very center of American politics in this way. So I just want to ask you about mental health, because this is something that the media and politics won't go to. The very powerful documentary that was called Unfit, the psychology of Donald Trump, which was on Netflix and Prime and various streaming services. It had a whole bunch of psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists analyzing Donald Trump. And the argument that a few people have made, how can you analyze him if you've never done a session with him? It's just garbage, because this is the most photographed man on the planet, right? So there's enough material for them to do this. And Bandy Lee, who's been on this show a few times, is the psychiatrist who really has put out this duty to warn, the fact that the malignant narcissism is the cause of all of this destruction.
Yes.
But the media won't talk about his mental health. And the other politicians won't go there either.
Right.
So it's left to comedians, and it's left to commentators, and it's left to people who really don't have that much skin in the game to do. So when you approached Donald Trump, how much of his mental health did you feel you had to tackle and be aware of?
It was actually... I think it was probably one of the more cathartic experiences I've had, and also frightening, because I had to reconcile, as I think we all do, we have to reconcile that we all have the nature or ability to turn that on in ourselves, that that is a part of yourself, right? It happens to be the part that governs him, Yeah, I mean, to take on and adopt and say, I'm going to just be pure, as I would see it, pure reaction. He's pure reaction. He is intaking all threats. And I think this probably comes from, because with two things, we had a psychologist on our show. We did a fake therapy session with Trump as one of our bits on the show. And I wish I could look it up, because the guy he had written a book. I should have remembered this, but I didn't prepare for this part. He wrote a book about the psychology of Trump, and he did an analysis, and it was sort of the same conversation, what's the ethical responsibility of analyzing someone? There's sort of two things. One, he expresses violence at a very early age. He is 5 or 6, and he is braining a kid with a rock. He used to take girls he would sit behind in class, and he would pull their ponytails and pull them down out of their chair. Okay. And these are from his childhood friends. I've spoken to them in segments on the show. He used to eat oranges through the rind as part of a ritual before they would play some sort of sport. But his mother, would have these nervous breakdowns, and she would sort of have these mental breakdowns, and his father was deeply abusive. So this is not, empathy is not sympathy, and empathy is not endorsement. But this was a person who probably grew up damaged, was born with some damage, watched his mother lose her mind. She would go into the bedroom and just lie there and not talk to anyone for days. Then she would have screaming fits. She would go wander down to the Key Foods and yell out in front of the Key Foods. And if she saw people of color, say that they were trying to mug her or attack her. Okay. So she was completely off her rocker. And Fred was abusive. And also, I think disappoint the old, how he always talks about his older brother who died, who passed away from alcoholism. Yeah. So, he was, I think, a huge trauma when he passed away. That's Mary's father. I think it was a really deep, deep trauma for Trump. I actually think Trump looked up to him. And also,
Trump didn't go to the funeral or something. He went to the cinema instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he did not go to the funeral. He went to the cinema, which, by the way, it seems gross on its face. Who knows what it was? I don't know. No. It could have been that he couldn't deal with it. But the point, and the reason I say is you have to approach it that he's a person, right? He might be monstrous. He is a person, right? And why it's important to see someone as a person is because that's the best way to defeat them. If you see them just as a sort of ethereal creature, a brand, a monster, whatever, you can't. So I think that in approaching that, I went, okay, so this guy is all defense, all stimuli, and also all indulgence. And everything is about scheming about what he can get away with. And I think he really does believe this. I think if he believes that if you believe in the reality that you want to, it's almost very sort of new age. I think he really believes in creating your own reality. And I think that's worked for him for quite a long time. I think his understanding of gaming the system of you want to build a building, and then don't pay the workers, let them sue you, and then let the courts do the work. And then you will pay 50% of the price. You'll pay the lawyers. You end up saving money, and you delay everybody, and you delay paying everybody, right? It's like what he's being charged with now, the hyperinflating of the value of his properties. This is an extension. Where is the line between bullshitting the way you bullshit in a bar, right? Where's the line between trying to pick up a lady in a bar and BSing a little bit, right, to pick her up, okay, just as an example of weird machismo, and lying about your building or lying about how many floors it has, or does it really do any harm to make value? And is his argument, his argument is wrong and right. The banks made money. And why I think what he does... Well,
he said there was no victim. Kept saying there's no victim. If anyone is the victim, it's me.
Yes, of course. And that's always going to be the case. But right. I think the one truth he does expose, and I think it's important to see those truths because it prepares us for the next version of him, which is going to be better, slicker, less gross, less weird, and is going to be more dangerous. Yeah. People think it's going to stop with him. He is just an avatar of something awful that is now in the world, that's always been in the world, but it's been resuscitated because of the new level of media exposure and our ability to see ourselves. You know, humanity now can see itself at a level it's never been able to before. We are witnessing each other way more than we ever have. You know, if you think about the exposure that the banks, just like the media, everyone was fine with benefiting off of this person all the way to the point where they became the president of the United States, right? Everyone didn't have a problem with him exploiting them and them exploiting him. And that should show the darker part of our system, which is that our system is structured to exploit, and then dump. Look at Britney Spears as an example. It's exploit, and then cut loose, right? But when you get the wrong person, and I think you got the wrong person with Trump, the exploitee became the exploiter. And so I think that at a certain point, he went, oh, you think I'm the sideshow? I'm the main event. And now, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you, by the way, as we've learned, the United States government can run rudderless and without direction for 4 years without any leadership. That's wild. That's not good.
I thought about that a lot, and I'm very pleased that you mention it, because it's something that it's a lesson to us all, really, that this figurehead can either do a lot of good with that much power, or they can be completely benign, make it all about them, and in the process just forget that they have a job to do. Because, you know, I'm of the opinion that he didn't really work during those 4 years. You know, he made a lot of noise, but he never really went to work. Listen, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk more with Anthony Atamanuik next. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbour or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial that is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. I gave a Fume to my sister, and she was shocked at how flavorful and fresh it tasted. It's easy to hold and perfectly balanced, and quite honestly, extremely fun to fidget with. The real wood material and sleek design definitely classes it up, and she feels pretty cool holding it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code WEEKEND to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code WEEKEND to save an additional 10% off your order today. Everyone knows how annoying cheap razors are. The cuts, the irritation, the frustration. And don't get me started with subscription razor services. The headaches those can cause. That's why you've got to meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and Mars rover. And now they're bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. Razor blades are like diving boards. The longer the board, the more the wobble. The more wobble, the more nicks, cuts, and scrapes. A bad shave isn't a blade problem, it's an extension problem. By using aerospace-grade CNC machines, Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And it gets better. The razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. Seriously, Henson Shaving wants to be the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. My first shave with the Henson razor was incredibly refreshing. The design is sleek, the durability is top-notch. The Henson razor is truly so much better than your run-of-the-mill, quote-unquote, traditional razor brand. And the affordability factor is absolutely game-changing. No more wasting your money on expensive blades. With Henson Shaving, you can get a year of blades for $5. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/weekend to pick the razor for you and use code WEEKEND and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure you add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/weekend and use code WEEKEND. We're back on the weekend show. Tony, would I be right in saying that comedy is a very serious business? And I think some people, kind of brush it off and think, oh, well, that's just... But, the comedians that I've been around and the work that goes into the types of show like The President's Show and other work that you've done, the laughter comes from the audience. That's the end result. But actually to get to that point, it requires people who are highly intelligent. To make people laugh requires great intellect and understanding of humanity. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you today, because, we're running out of analysis with him, with Trump. We've spoken, so many people talk about him with such authority, but actually to really kind of get a sense of the who this person is kind of where this conversation is today. Do you feel, as I do, sometimes I actually felt a little bit sorry for him because I don't think he ever wanted to be president. And I think that, he was grifting. He wanted to set up Trump TV. He was just using it as a vehicle to make money. And then suddenly he's landed with this job that he's completely unqualified for. Yes. And in a parallel universe, he might have gone, something, I was only kidding. Let's give it to Hillary Clinton. But we're not dealing with that kind of a person, and what we ended up with was the destruction of the civil service, the destruction of the EPA, gutting the Environmental Protection Agency, the cozying up to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong, these relationships. Even now, this week, he's talking about Viktor Orban, one of the most terrifying leaders in the world. The Hungarian leader, of course, not the Turkish leader, as Donald Trump would have you think. And talking about these people like they're his best friends and that they're very... Hezbollah, calling Hezbollah very smart. Yeah. This is not a laughing matter, is it?
No, well, we had a thing called Dictator Sleepover, which was a bit we did on President's Show. It was, one of the plays was that Trump, could never say, so he would be like, I'm going to sleep over with Edgerton and Duterte and all the good, and then I would change it. The next time I would say, Duterte is one of the best. He's a great leader and he knows how to get rid of the robbers. He loves strong men. To me, I don't feel bad for him at all. I think he comes from the only way that he's pitiable is that, he was always on the outside, and in that sense, knowing it's pitiable, in the sense of a story. If you were reading it in a story and it was a metaphor and it wasn't a real person, I could feel bad for him. Right. Which is, he's always on the outside. He never could be in with the real estate people. The wasps in the real estate world weren't going to let him in, even though he was a wasp, but he was a redhead weirdo.
Which is why he pretends to be a mafia boss. You know, he thinks of the Trump family as a mafia family, and the Trump crime family actually, as a phrase, really suits them rather well. But they're still, you know, he talks about Al Capone like that's his mentor, but actually Al Capone wouldn't want to have anything to do with Donald Trump.
No, and his father did have connections with the mafia. Allegedly, and we did so basically anything you referred to, I can go that analysis that you're talking about. That's now a mainstreamed analysis. We did it before anybody said it. So the President's Show, if you go back, every single episode is literally what is now a mainstream analysis, like the whole cult leader thing, for instance. Yeah. The whole thing, he was a cult leader and he's like Jim Jones and like all this stuff. People have been on CNN and plugging their book about how I've cracked the code, that he's, you know, like Charles Manson or whatever. We did the week Kofifi came out, and this is an example of comedy is serious business. We had a research team. We had an incredible research team. A lot of the people who worked on our research team ended up working for worked for The Intercept, The Guardian. Like, we had people who were working in news, also doing research for us. So everything was thoroughly vetted that we did, comedy-wise, in terms of information. But also our analysis was always like, how can we, and I think this was the package, you know, a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down, which is, we need to do something silly, because also it's in the idea that this show is done by Trump. So we have this weird intersection between broad humor, almost Dom DeLuise, Burt Reynolds on the Tonight Show humor, intersecting with these serious, heavy analysis that we're making about the state of our society, right? And in this
satire, ultimately.
Which is satire, right?
The essence of satire.
So Kofifi, the course of that episode, we essentially rolled the episode so that by the end, I have decided that that the only way for us to go forward is that we have to end everything. And I had my writers work for actual Jim Jones quotes into the closing monologue, and I had the Jim Jones glasses. I looked like him. And then we passed out shots of liquid. That was the Kofifi. That was the week of Kofifi. And so I went, drink the Kofifi and be free. This world, death is awaiting us. And so, and that was our way of saying, this is classic cult leader. And if you notice in terms of history, a lot of cult analysis, a lot of the funding for that in the FBI dried up in the late 90s. And if you think about it, because of our lack of awareness of cult analysis, it has led to NXIVM, Teal Swan, Donald Trump. All these new cults have sprung up partly because of, again, every time there's an advancement in mass media, from Gutenberg's printing press to the radio to film to social media, along with it comes proto-fascistic nationalistic states in the 15th and 16th centuries. It comes fascism across Europe in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then, of course, fascism coming with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Periscope. So you can see this pattern. So,
it's cyclical, isn't it? I mean, a lot of scholars talk about the cyclical nature of these things. In the same way that clothes come back into fashion, so does political extremism and kind of cult behavior.
Partnered with media expansion. The reason I said it's so important to see this is that in our current circumstance right now, where, yes, everything is really the most tragic it's been in the Middle East, and at the same time, we've both been around for the first intifada, the second intifada. We were maybe, I don't know if you were alive for the hostages in the 70s, that the Olympic murders. This is not new, and yet it is new in the sense that we see each other. We see broadcasts on TikTok. And I think that there is something to be said for the idea that seeing each other and then also Marshall McLuhan put this so poignantly, which is the medium is the message, but also you can't trust the image. And we have reached a point at which we just trust the image. We trust what's being fed to us. And I think people like Trump intuitively, not intellectually, and I can say, because you're talking about and analyzing him, what is the analysis? What needs to be done anymore? He is so nakedly who he is. There is no need to analyze him. He says exactly what he's doing. There's the one deep frustration I have in a lot of the Trump side culture is this idea that there's some secret formula, some everlasting gobstopper formula about this sort of bloviating moron who through just basic sort of emotional intelligence is able to sort of bulldoze through circumstances. And at the same time, I think bifurcates his mind such that I do think that there are moments, because I've heard them on audio where like his grandson came into the Oval Office. He didn't realize he was being recorded. And he was very much like hearing my grandpa talk to me. You know what I mean? In other words, I think that he believes he's a good person. I don't think he thinks he's a villain. I think he thinks he's a good person doing good. And he and so what if I get a little on the side, which by the way, when we did The Dawn, which you can also look up on the President Show, we had Michael Francese and other real mafia people who talked to us not only about how he operated. Again, this was recorded in 2017 before this analysis was mainstreamed. And yeah, we did 25. We predicted January 6th. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting animated because it's frustrating in this sense, which is that we only had those 24, 25 episodes, including the specials that we did. And I'm very grateful for that time. But my producers and I, we're all old friends. So we write each other once in a while, go, what would we have done with COVID? What would we have done with this trial? One of our pitches was the trial of Donald Trump. One of the pitches in 2018. So when I guess it's hard for me to speak about it in this way sometimes because it's so obvious to me who he is and what he's doing. And he's playing on the larger politeness of people. And much like the Golden State Killer, there's that story of the Golden State Killer getting caught, right? And his voice suddenly softens and it's almost baby-like and high registered, right? And the police sort of drop their guard a little bit. And then he pulls the gun, fires, and then runs into the ditch. That's who you're dealing with. You're dealing with the Long Island serial killer if instead he was in real estate and ran for office. That's all.
So let me ask you, because people often get quite animated themselves when people say he's dumb. He's not smart. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just an idiot. And then the counter argument is that actually he's a criminal mastermind and that he's a genius and he's a marketing genius. Where do you think that argument should land? Neither
are true. He is a rare form of listen, I think that he has a couple of tricks that have worked for a long time. So do I think that he has in his pocket, do I think he has a fundamental understanding of how to play the media? And do I think he exposed the media to that? He exposed them for that. And therefore that was the big shift that happened from 2016 to 2020.
The fake news movement.
Yes. And that what arose from that, look at the ecosystem. Look at the ecosystem now of news and alternate media that has erupted out of, right? To the degree where you have desperation by Fox, MSNBC, and CNN to try to get coverage, that they're almost frothing when some crisis happens because they know at least they'll get nominal viewership. As you said, you're getting viewership online that most cable channels would kill for on a weekly basis. Now think about if you sling ugliness, right, and awfulness, and people are attracted to that and have been for time immemorial. It's the circus. People are going to. So Trump, does he have that innate understanding? Yes. So in that sense, I would say that I think that he is a rare creature. I said this once, I think on another show. I can't remember, but he's like an amoeba, whereas it's almost more like the way that a sea turtle knows to go to the light of the moon I don't think that it's intellectual. I think that it is reptilian, and not like in a David Icke, crazy way, but like, I think it's reptilian in the sense that he is reacting to stimuli. He has stimulus. I think really, if anything, everything is about stimulation for him. It's about stimulus and survival. And if there's any genius, it's his capacity to charm. I have no doubt that hanging out and having dinner with him would be fun. I bet that you shoot the shit about Kim Kardashian, Bravo stuff, a couple of celebrity gossip. I mean, you just think about how he is. I used to do a bit in the live show where I would talk about green energy, and it became me basically talking about the plot of Star Trek II and terraforming a planet. But Trump is sort of, moving in and out where he's like, the Project Genesis can transform a planet in 24 hours. It's incredible. I've seen it in a movie. And so the idea of that he lapses in and out. What does he know is reality? What isn't reality? Because if your entire existence is making up stories and pretending to be other people to get attention, the older you get, the one, you've hardwired yourself to do that. So you have hardwired neural pathways. And in addition to that, you so fundamentally lose your capacity to determine what's real and what's not that, again, do I think there's genius there? I don't know. I think that there is a very savvy ability to take advantage of exploitable areas. And what we learned was there was a lot of, in a free society, there's a lot to exploit because that's the nature of a free society.
There were a couple of moments where, I don't know if you felt this, but I felt that whenever he gave a press conference, which invariably was outside of Marine One with the helicopter noise, so you couldn't really hear him and he couldn't really hear them, which definitely was done on purpose so that he couldn't be held to account.
Yes.
But he would often not know what to say, and so the reporters would give him an option of something to say, which then became his opinion. And so a lot of the media unknowingly were driving policy because they were implanting solutions or answers. Are you going to fire this person? Do you think that this person should apologize? And he'd never thought about any of this because all he thought about was McDonald's. So suddenly he was like given a script. And conversely, that would happen like when he thought of Space Force because he kind of got something wrong. And he goes, Space Force. And then he's like, you see the brain going, this is a marketing genius. And then, of course, he steals the Star Trek logo and the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the most powerful man in the world for those 4 years, and this is how he operates.
Yeah. I mean, we allowed this to happen. We as a population allowed this to happen because of a number of factors. Some of them have to do with sexism and misogyny. Some of them have to do with the larger exploitation of the working person at the expense of the political system. And some of it has to do with a lot of latency. A lot of it has to do with the latency of the disparities in American society between those who built the country for free and were enslaved, and the fact that was never answered, it was never spoken to. It is a particular issue in the Black community. There are many other marginalized groups in the United States, and there's indigenous folks, but the Black community in particular in this country was exploited and abused in ways that are unique to America and to the experience of essentially who were the original Americans were the whites who came over here and the Blacks that we brought over. Right. And I think that it is disgraceful, and it was a disgrace that we went into the 21st century with never uttering an acknowledgement or even considering an apology and allowing to essentially replace our slave system and plantation system with an imprisonment system. And people didn't forgive the Clintons for that, which was what happened in the 90s with the crime bill, which also our current president also signed off on. And
although Bill Clinton has apologized and regrets that now.
But only after. Only after. But and my point is that, and that's wonderful that he did. But think of all the people who are incarcerated, that apology, who are incarcerated and should not be in jail right now, right?
Or who have died in jail.
Have died in jail. And so my point is that it's not as easy as, well, they just hated Hillary Clinton, or Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate, or Bernie ruined it, or Trump ruined it, or these easy answers we want these easy answers. As I've said, and I've said it in a million interviews, and I said it in the show, and it was the last thing I said when I knew that the show was not going to continue, which is, he is not the problem. He is a symptom. Okay. He is losing your taste with COVID. Okay. He is not the disease. The disease is the fact that we, for some reason, believed that because a bunch of Brits who didn't want to pay for their furniture, who ended up forming this country, right? A bunch of Brits, expat Brits, who said, I don't want to pay for this luxury furniture that got delivered to me, so let's have a revolution instead, right? And then we'll draft some lofty principles along with it that exclude women and pretty much anybody except white men who won't land. That somehow we went, that's it, we did it. We don't need to evolve anymore. We're realizing that that's not true. We need to evolve more. We need to understand that we will continue to run into the same issue over and over and over again as long as people continue to be exploited, as long as we continue to live on this barter for money system. And I'm not some extreme lefty even. I think I'm left, but apparently sometimes I'm not anymore, I guess. But to me, it's not about left or right. It's about progression out of rudimentary systems that just keep us in this cyclical fashion. It will be Trump. It'll be somebody else. There'll be somebody else who will come along. And God forbid, we think it's only a right-wing person that can be like this. It could be it's not like Robert Kennedy Jr.'s any dream. So you have all kinds of people representing from all fringes. And what we have done and what Trump opened up, which is the most devastating thing he did, was, I was saying earlier, he's made the fringe. He's made the idea of extremity and the idea of extremity, and you see it in the way that people are expressing their natural dismay at the violence in the Middle East, is this extremity, this unnecessary next level of reveling in violence and death of other people. This is a direct result of Trump. This is a direct result of our celebration of extremity and viewing moderation, right, as somehow slow, weak, corporate, mainstream, right? Whereas there's a version of moderation that is instead saying, no, we want to lift everybody up, and we want to do it in a secure way that gives us a new system that we can do this in without having to completely agitate and destroy. Because the true comfort of the West is the belief that crashing the system would somehow, you'd still be able to get your Netflix and your Seamless and your Blue Apron and all the BS that all these people are doing, right? They're on Twitter talking about burn the system down. But do you want to live without clean water? Do you want to get hepatitis? Do you want to be scavenging or fighting to live, as most of the world already does? And a lot of the world wants to come here because they don't want that. So my only thing is that we've reached this point where I think we're so desperate, and Trump represented that desperation so well. And he provided what most fascist dictators provide, an easy 1, 2, 3 solution. He's the Ron Popeil of presidents. He's an infomercial as a president. But that's what we kind of deserved. We got what we deserved from our laxness. Sorry, you have to cut me off. I'll keep talking, Anthony.
No, I don't want to cut you off. And I was actually thinking about the genius of an improviser is to open their mind to language. And it's really powerful to listen to. Listen, we have to take another quick break, but I want to come back and talk more with Tony in just a moment here on The Weekend Show. I've always found it difficult to find clothes that I like to wear. And when I find one thing that works, I just buy loads of them and just wear the same thing all the time. Well, men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion. The commuter collection offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, zips, and polos. You'll never have to worry about what to wear when you've got the Rhone commuter collection. The comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work or your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. And with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I personally love a technical fabric, something that is advanced and uses technology to make a more comfortable and more modern outfit. Now, the commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So head to rhone.com/Anthony and use promo code Anthony to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to rhone.com/Anthony and use code Anthony, ANTHONY. It's time to find your corner office comfort. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the weekend show, and we're with Anthony Atamanuik. There's so much to say about this guy, and my fear is that when we talk about Donald Trump, it's always done with a smile on our face and with humor, because there is something about him that is intrinsically amusing. Mm-hmm. And yet he is responsible for atrocities. If you're white and wealthy, it kind of doesn't matter. But if you are black or brown, or if you're poor, or if you are somebody who is on the receiving end of his bile, then life has been made very difficult. And I really feel like maybe you can just answer why is it so difficult to talk about him in such in a serious and tragic way, as we should do, as an authoritarian leader of America who has changed the face of American politics, turned people against each other, weaponized language like socialism and Marxism and communism and all this stuff, and most importantly, and certainly the one I feel is so serious, is claiming that the free press is the enemy of the people. Mm-hmm. Why are conversations like this often done in with a sense of humor? Is it because we just can't handle the seriousness and doomsday conversations don't play well in America?
No, I think that, listen, I think that's the reason I only had 24 episodes of my show, because I agree with you. I think that it was okay to portray him as a buffoon. And my perspective of portraying him was to portray him earnestly ignorant, earnestly, blissfully moving through, but always panicked about getting caught, right?
Which is all true.
He's on the lam, which is all true.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of, we were doing the show when the Vegas shooting happened. And, it was one of the largest losses of life in the United States in a shooting in its history. And it was really devastating. But one of the things I had noticed, and this ties back to something you had spoken about earlier, was that all the late night hosts had to do this sort of like solemn speech, right?
Wear a black tie and
wear a black tie and do. Yeah. And I went into the writer's room and I said, I really find it sort of silly that, when did this happen? That the late night host became this sort of, Walter Cronkite, like they're a comedy night host. I get and it goes to the blurring of the line that the Daily Show sort of, inadvertently created, that media then took over. And mind you, the Daily Show, although a political satire show, originally was a cable news satire show. The idea was that they showed clips of cable news and mocked that. So here we are in this stage where, you have Jimmy Fallon staying there with a black tie, talking with solemnity about the shooting, which is fine. Obviously, it was an awful thing, but it's also like, come on, man. What are we talking about? Like, he's talking with solemnity about this. So I went, well, Trump does a talk show, so we're going to have to do the same thing. And this way I can double mock the notion that late night hosts have to act like consolers in chief. And what does Trump's version of consoling look like, right? So we did this bit, and the whole thing is that he's trying to do it, right? He's trying to like be solemn, and he keeps going, be solemn, keep it soft and quiet, solemnity now. And, and then talking about the mass loss of life. And then at one point, I think I go, when we were devastated when we heard it wasn't a Muslim guy who did it, but those are awful things, right? Those are terrible things, but they're true things about him, right? Or it's like our mockumentary, Hindsight 2030, where we go from 2030 back. Look, we sort of did Time Trumpet, but like American Time Trumpet, basically. And so we, one of the things we had was the night of the election, we had Trump saying, I will not concede. We actually had that filmed in 2018 and were able to beat the real thing from happening. Almost verbatim, what he does in real life, we did. And the point I'm saying is that it was funny because we shot that, and when we watched it back, even then, it didn't play as funny. It played as terrifying. And I think that the thing is that it's that, like all things with him, it's hard to stay in serious. It just goes to terrifying. So I think people tend to stay in the zone where there's a little bit of lightness because he's so foolish and can be so foolish. And, all these statements of, it's all the same act, right? He's walking out in front of the courtroom now, right? He finds the cameras, this is disgrace. And I think we learned today that they're going to throw it out and this is important. And he's telling himself as much as he's telling everyone else. What terrifies people is they go, this guy could be president again. And that, yes, he's caused the loss of life. And I know already there's going to be some Jimmy Dore listening lefty watching this who's going to go, well, but Obama bombed. Yes, Obama did bomb this many weddings, and so did Bush, and so did Clinton, and we have a long history of really not great stuff that we've done. But Donald Trump not only purposely and cruelly, right, made policy decisions that were not just maybe the worst decision. And I'm not validating that, but the best, worst decision, but purposefully cruel decisions. And I think we'll look back at the first impeachment based on the Ukraine stuff with Zelensky. I think you can directly trace that act to the loss of life in Ukraine. You can actually pin the loss of life in Ukraine on Donald Trump, because of what he did, which was weaken the position of Ukraine such that there was an opportunity for Russia to make a play. And I do think people forget, right now we're in an era where, talking about seriousness, of a lot of burn it all down, we need to reclaim it, and a lot of the stuff you're hearing out of, justifiably, as I've said before, I think I'm on the side of a lot of the things I'm talking about, but a lot of the propaganda you see online is age old. It is Soviet. It's the same stuff the Nazis were dropping on the black regiments in the 40s, which was exposing truths about the West, colonialism, exploitation of indigenous peoples. All these things are truths for sure, and should be reconciled with. And as I talked about earlier, I think it's one of our great failings politically that we do not do that more deeply. But the Soviet Union used to do that and go, well, but you can choose us, choose Pepsi, choose the Soviet Union. We're your alternative governing system, right? But what's crazy is that the Russians and the Chinese in particular, FSB and so on, and in Iran to a certain level, have chosen this propaganda campaign online using the same old tactics but without any offer of an alternative, which is devastating to a lot of the free world, which is just burn it down. There is no solution. And you want to talk about frightening. Forget Trump. It is the fact that right, left, and center, that is becoming the sentiment, which is burn it down. And I, again, don't think people get that when you burn it down, there's nothing there. And if there's nothing there, what do you do? And then you leave room. People talk about, is Biden the best option? He is right now. He beat Trump once. If you did not have Trump or the media environment that we have now, he would be considered one of the greater presidents in terms of economic recovery. And by the way, he's to the left of Carter on some things. I mean, I cannot believe some of the things that Joe Biden's done that would never be done by Clinton or Obama. Okay. So it blows my mind that, and it's a shame he's older. That is frightening to people. And I think I understand
the ridicule is that we talked about earlier, where the media should be ridiculing Trump as a candidate. Yeah. The ridicule is towards Biden for being old and senile and things that he can't help being old. Yes. He's not senile. He's often very tired, especially when they stick him on a long-haul flight and then give him a press conference afterwards.
Yes.
And anybody who has elderly grandparents will know that is probably not a good idea. Yes. And so we seem to lose all of our humanity when it comes to dealing with people who really matter, like Joe Biden, because, as you say, in this moment in history, in time, this is almost a more important election in 2024 than in 2020. And so...
yes. And I want to say that...
And so, go on.
You're going. I just want to say to you that the other thing that's frightening to me is the inverse is true this time. The lack of coverage of Trump. The media blackout on Trump so that he only shows up on Right Side. He only shows up on Truth Social. You only see just the briefest analysis of his trials. It's very dangerous because it's the opposite this time.
That's right.
Less coverage of him gives him more opportunity to simply be amorphous and to slide in and win. And I think people are really, I cannot believe it, but I think people yet again are not believing it's possible for him to win. And if there's anybody who is going to pull off a non-consecutive second term, it's Donald Trump.
I agree.
And I cannot believe we're here again. I can't.
People say to me all the time, Tony, they're like, why do you talk about him all the time? And it's like, we should be talking about nothing else until this guy is 6 feet under, because he represents a threat to everything that you've taken for granted your whole life. He wants to shut down the judiciary. He wants to shut down the FBI. He wants to take civil servants and give them an allegiance test to find out if they are pro-Trump, and if they are, they can keep their jobs. He wants to build freedom cities, which are, it's just terrifying. I mean, even talking about taking the homeless and putting them in camps. He's talking about internment camps.
Yes.
We are, and not to mention the fact that he tried to overturn the election, staged a coup, stole classified documents, and then shared them with foes of the United States. The list of his crimes are endless, and yet I know people who you would consider to be moderate, and they're like, well, when Trump was the president, there were no wars.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to argue without spending 2 hours talking.
Well, he is what I would call an accidental pacifist, which is that I think that if there's anything that Trump fears, like most narcissists, it's losing their life. And so if you notice, the two military actions he took were like bombing a runway after everyone had been gone, right? And I actually think, and I used to portray him this way, I actually think he's like a tender little lily. I think he's for lack of a better word, I think he's a very fey guy. I think he's very, very effeminate. I think that the notion that Trump is macho has always been so funny to me. He's very effeminate. He's very grandmothery. He's very, and I think he's like, and again, I don't think he has a problem with loss of life. I just don't think he sees military action as a precursor to nuclear war. And I think that this is why he sidles up with with Putin and with Kim Jong-un in China so much. I think also he sees China strangely as both a partner in trade, right? But he also sees them as a military power that he's afraid of. And so he would talk tough with China because he sees that as like making a deal, as like doing and he was always getting terrible deals. So the greatest part of it was he negotiated the worst deals, right? Even his milk embargo with Canada ended up costing us money. So like, it's astonishing to me that someone could be so piss poor at everything and stumble through with no one. And what you said is so true. And I think it's the growing list of the buckshot of criminality is such that I think it becomes overwhelming. And I think you have the worst combination of disaffected people, especially young people, who are justifiably disaffected. They look at the world and go, I look at it and go, I barely got through, like in the sense of I am fortunate that I will have some property because of my family, because of my parents owning a home. But there are people who are a generation behind me who have no hope of ever owning a home, who have no hope of having decent health care, who have no hope whatsoever of doing anything other than like at best getting high at the dispensary and working 2 or 3 jobs. When you look at that disaffection and then you look at the overwhelming criminality of someone like Trump, and you have that intersection of other fringe candidates who are representing to you some part of your needs, it's very easy to see the mainstream control system as corrupt. And so Trump represents a resistance towards that corruption, even if he is corrupt himself. So it washes all of his crimes and it makes them a big melange of sort of just, hell, that's just kind of who he is. And when you get there, right, and he's not in power and we can blame somebody else for what's going on. But think about the fact that post-Trump, is the presidency ever going to be regarded as serious anymore? We're living in a multipolar world. And I think that we might have to learn the lesson the hard way, that the notion of individual liberty, expression, free movement, these things that we have counted on for only a brief period of time, only the resurrection of antiquity happens in full robustness in the 16th and 17th century. We're talking 400 years. A candle has been lit that the wick is that short, and we are flicking that flame. And who knows, the last time we snuffed out that candle was 1,100 years. 1,100 years of illiteracy and disease and control by radical religious elements that the Catholic Church and the resulting crusades I'm forgetting the word right now, the Inquisition. These things are the result of not having any ordered society that considers individual expression and self important. And I think we have no consideration for how paper thin the membrane is. And even after everything we've been through. Anyway, that's my speech.
The word really that is being mistreated, just finally, is democracy.
Yes.
It's a word that people didn't really think about until there was a chance they might lose it. The far right in Congress now, and I include the Speaker of the House, say that, well, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. And so they're trying to change the language, and the nuance of America being both is now lost on this polarized society. Mm-hmm. How important is it that we kind of re-educate people in the importance of democracy? And is it that democracy is going to become a commodity that is exclusive to the Democrats and the Republicans care nothing for?
I think that there's three dangers. I think the first one is that we end up in a multinational corporatized democratic system, which is that we can't get out from under our own indecisiveness and bureaucracy because of the corrupted state of our Congress, and therefore no real substantive change can be made at even at state and local levels that would have impact. So you're not going to have this opportunity to reintroduce civics. You're not going to have a president who's willing to only serve one term because they're going to make bold executive decisions that reorient how the Department of Education funds various impoverished school systems around the country. That's the only solution would be for someone to really to a bee sting candidate, a person who says we have 4 years to essentially do an end around Congress and try to reshape this country at a state by state, county by county level, and hope that in 4 years enough of the benefits arrive that people go, we don't want this taken away. Now you took this away from us. It's always harder to take something away than it is to introduce it. So that's the only option. And I don't know if the Democrats have the spine for that. Okay.
Well, they won't even do basic things like abolish the filibuster, which is probably a good place to start, or pack the Supreme Court with a few more Democrat voices. I mean, to me, these are essential. Yes. And yet you have Democrats wanting to play by the rules, and you have Republicans who've thrown the rule book out of the window, and they're like, well, this is how we're going to do it now.
Well, it's the slow bleed. It's in poker, it would be that you have a diminishing chip stack. And you believe that if you continue to play cautiously and carefully, you'll just hit the right hand and you'll win your stack back. But you end up just pissing away all your chips. You've got to make a big swing, but you might blow it. But the argument would be you're going to lose the chips one way or another. And I think in the United States right now, the way we're going, unless we make a big swing, which will tee up the possibility of the opposition doing it in the other direction. That's for certain true. But it is a guarantee if we do nothing that this will just slowly become a theocratic state. I think we haven't mentioned this in the entirety of this interview, that Roe v. Wade was overturned, that a woman's bodily right to her autonomy is no longer the law of the land in the United States. And as I know women are probably not feeling this way, but let's face it, how is that not the main story every single day? How many women, sorry, I just hit the table. How many women are in charge of newsrooms? How many women are the faces of news? And it's not the top, and it doesn't have to just be women, but it affects obviously women deeply because of their autonomy. So we're so numb. And my concern is that what will end up happening is you'll have a pseudo democracy brought to you by Citibank, which is already where we're going, which is that global multinationals will go, we can handle it. Because ultimately, again, what do people want most? They want the comfort and safety of their things, their streaming, their food, their object. And if they can have their pipe and get a little high and watch Netflix and have their Blue Apron and chill out for the night, they're going to do that. And whoever provides that stability where there's not much interference and they don't have to look too much at the ugliness of what gets them that's what they're going to go for. And so I don't know what the solution is.
Do you think that if Trump were to win in next year, do you think that that's what America deserves? Like, by taking one's eye off the ball, all of these component parts that we've talked about, from the media being involved and rampant capitalism and everything that is this imperfect storm that has created this movement, is that what the US deserves? You know, sometimes it when you think it can't go any lower, it needs to before it can rise again.
Yes, I would say it's what we're going to get. I don't think that we deserve it. But I think that we might serve it up to ourselves. Does that make sense? We don't deserve the dinner we're making for ourselves, but we're going to make it. That's my concern. And I get the cynicism. I understand it. The same way, I think growing up in this country, as anyone grows up in any country, in any nation they grow up in, you have a period of time where you get sort of cynical about patriotism, and you get cynical about sort of like the, celebrating of your own society and all these sort of tribal things that we do. And it's natural, right? And then I think you start to, like you said, the cage gets rattled and you look around and go, well, in our primal world that has only recently peeked its head up from the soup, okay, there aren't many things around the world that have the power to shape and move ourselves further along than democratic societies. And the thing we need to answer for is how up to now, we have done that at the expense of a lot of people, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere. And our great reckoning would be to acknowledge it, move on, and start taking a lot of the money that we have and fix our house and fix other houses. Fix the 100 years of CIA intervention into Central America. And you know what you do? You start to also bottleneck your immigration crisis, because people go, I don't need to escape Honduras because I'm afraid my kid's head is going to get put on a pike. So I think that, I think Trump getting elected will, I think if Trump gets reelected, I don't know what we are in 4 years after that. I think, like I said, I think we'll either be saved by multinational corporations, or I think we will have a series of violent, destabilizing events in the United States and around the world that will plunge us into such chaos that it will be we think day to day now. We go, day to day, or like when we had Trump as president, it was like, I can't take another day. It feels claustrophobic. Him being president a second time, minute to minute, second to second. Yeah. Just like truly
isn't it interesting,
terrifying.
though, that I talked a lot about the fact that how do we have these conversations and get really serious? Mm-hmm. And the only time you and I lost our smiles was when we talked about the prospect of him winning a second term.
Yeah.
Because that is, there is a visceral reaction to the danger of that. And it's not because we're snowflake lefties or any of that stuff. It's because we appreciate that a society needs leadership and it needs guidance. And we haven't mentioned climate change, but he doesn't even know what that is. Right. And most of my reading and research at the moment is about climate migration and how as the planet warms, we're going to see an influx of climate migrants at a rate that the southern border has never seen in history. And no one is talking about it. Right. The only person that mentions it is Greta Thunberg, and she keeps being arrested for protesting.
Yes.
So, that is the kind of the future that we have to look forward to if we take our eye off the ball. Tony, we have to finish, but I'm so thrilled to have this opportunity to talk to you. I so enjoyed when I first saw the President Show, I was like, this is genius. My only regret is that it didn't run the whole length of the Trump presidency, because we needed that satire to remind us of how ridiculous he was and still is. Tragically.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it, and I'm probably glad that it didn't run, because it saved me some mental, mental torture.
It's a lot of work. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks to Anthony Atamanuik. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News and download the daily 5-Minute News podcast, which drops every morning. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and more factual stories to discuss on the 5-Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.